Morning. Hey, Crystal, that's a pretty cool thing on your profile picture.
Thanks. Did you get a haircut? It looks like you got a haircut and a trim, Randy.
No, I finally got long enough I could slick it back.
Oh.
So that's all. Yeah. But I don't want to look like no, I'm not going to wear a hair tie and look like one of those stereotypical college professors in the old Mallard Fillmore comic strips, which, sorry if I'm getting too specific, probably a lot of people won't remember it or have tried to forget it. But yeah, and I trimmed it. I took about 3 inches off my mustache too. Eileen noticed it was filtering my food a little too effectively.
Okay, good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock. It's Monday morning, February 8th. And thanks for attending and listening in to this special meeting that was scheduled Saturday evening for us to talk about where we're at in the new dial framework and what it looks like moving forward. I think part of the intent is to have this conversation as early in the week as possible to give our business community as much notice as possible so they can make their decisions. So that said, the first thing on the agenda here is public comment. So why don't we go ahead and open up public comment now. I'll keep my eye on the Facebook feed. And if you have a comment you'd like to make and you're in Zoom, please click attendees. You'll see raise hand or participants, sorry, and then you'll see the raise hand button there.
I don't see anything here, George.
I don't either. So, okay, well then why don't we go ahead and get started. I'm not sure where I'd like to begin here. Maybe our public health folks can just talk about, for everybody to have context of where we are, what's going on with the new dial update, and where we land in that.
Sure.
Yeah, one thing I would maybe just prime the conversation with, I heard a lot over the weekend from folks across the county. Kind of the one thing that was constant or was a commonality was surprise at our path versus other counties that have opened up their, have moved to yellow on Saturday, particularly counties that may be perceived to have the pandemic less under control than we do. And that's why over the weekend, I was hoping that we could talk about it, like you said, George, with enough time to take action if we thought that was appropriate. So forgive me, but I just wanted to throw that out there as a little bit of context.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. And don't ever want to be the person to dominate the mic and pass it off without giving my colleagues a chance to say something. Randy, you have anything to add at this time? No? Okay. Tim, I think it's all you.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. So context, last week, Friday, CDPHE, in collaboration with the governor's office, obviously, they came out with the Dial 2.0, with the primary emphasis on opening the economy up county by county, given our reduction in numbers across the state. And for the record, CDPHE is the one who designates any one county and any one color. I don't have that magical power to do that. They are the one who create the dial, who have created the dial, and who put any one county in the color they designate. So having said that, The idea behind 2.0 is to provide a little bit more leeway within colors around incidence, hospitalization, and test positivity. So they lowered the threshold for any one of the colors, and they broadened the range within each color in terms of primarily around incidence for that color. Within each color, nothing has changed in the sense of how more open restaurants can be, how more open gyms can be. None of those parameters changed within any one color. I think their plan is to introduce that sort of thing on the Dial 3.0, which is scheduled potentially in mid-March or so. So we're going to revisit this probably in another 4 or 5 weeks, I would imagine. The designation that CDPHE gave Clear Creek County is in orange. And the primary justification around that from CDPHE's perspective is we've tested 19 people in the last 3 weeks in Clear Creek County. One of the nuances with Dial 2.0 is that counties can move based on a single week's numbers as opposed to 2 weeks. So that was shortened from the 2-week threshold down to the 1-week threshold. And rather than move Clear Creek County to what was yellow and or blue based on lack of testing, and then only to find out in a week's time that in fact we're in yellow or orange once we have testing underway, and moving us back and forth, that we would stay where we are until we have 2 weeks worth of testing and then move to the designated color based on our numbers. So it's very possible that this Friday we move to blue, just as an example, from where we are now. That is very possible. It's also in line with what we have been trying to do at Public Health and hold steady for businesses, particularly restaurants, instead of going down to blue, only back to yellow, back to blue, because our numbers change while we get testing underway. It made more sense to stay where we're at, wait till we have testing, and then designate our county under that specific color based on our numbers. That's pretty much in a nutshell. Right now, our test positivity rate is 2.4% in the county, and our case cumulative incident rate based on a single week is 61 per 100,000. But again, that's based on testing 19 people in the last 3 weeks. I know most counties around us did not move. Summit, Eagle, Grand, et cetera, stayed in orange. So I'm not sure what other changes are made in counties. And I've come to learn very quickly that we shouldn't compare ourselves to other counties, because what CDPHE does for one county, I cannot explain that in any rational way. So trying to come up with an explanation doesn't, in my opinion, make sense. Makes much more sense to focus on our own county and what we're doing in our county and how we can make that better in doing what we're doing. So that's pretty much 2.0 in a nutshell. We have testing scheduled for tomorrow. I do not know how many people are scheduled to get tested, but regardless, it will be a 2-week period of testing tomorrow. We should have those numbers by Thursday or Friday at the very latest, and move from there based on that. So if I was a restaurant owner, I would plan to have a more open restaurant in the coming week. That's all I can say on that matter. I don't really know anyone. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know more than that, but that's based on what I'm seeing right now. That's my opinion.
Okay, Sean, Randy, you have any comments at this point?
Hey, thanks, Tim. I had just a couple of questions. I agree that we need to, and I'm very proud of the citizens and the business owners in Clear Creek. I think one of the reasons that our numbers have been relatively good is because of the responsible behavior, and I always like to point that out. But I think it's least appropriate to compare ourselves to the mountain communities, because that's really not who we are. You know, we don't have any large hotels. We don't have Vail or Steamboat or any of these other, or Winter Park. I was at Winter Park yesterday, and for sure, they're still suffering pretty widespread spread in their community, no doubt about it. There were a ton of people at the resort who I heard were in quarantine because of contact tracing. I heard even some of the lifts at Winter Park. I don't know if this is 100% true, but I heard from someone in their government that some of their lifts weren't running because so many people that were working on the mountain were infected or had some contact with someone who were infected. So I don't have any doubt that Summit County, Pitkin County, Eagle County, Grand County, they've got a ways to go. They don't have things under control yet. And kind of where I wondered about whether we were striking the right balance is counties like Gilpin County, who's already gone to blue, counties like Jefferson County, which I believe historically has had higher numbers than us over almost the entire pandemic. And if they had higher numbers than us 3 or 4 weeks ago, 2 months ago, when everyone was testing like mad, it would seem to me that they probably have higher numbers than we have now, even though they have lowered the restrictions to yellow. So I appreciate following the science for sure, Dr. Ryan. The only kind of thing I'm wondering is how, and Gilpin, I think, has the same curative issue with their testing that we did. And I think some of Jefferson County does too. So I guess maybe who I would like to see at this call or part of this conversation is CDPHE. And, you know, I doubt we can vector them in right this second, but maybe we could talk to them tomorrow, because it seems like there's inconsistency between what's happening in some of the counties to our north, south, and basically every direction except to the ski areas. So anyway, that's why I wanted to have this conversation, and maybe the business owners can work with having a deadline or finding out what's going to happen for the President's Day weekend on Friday or Thursday, or I don't know if there's any way we could put our thinking caps on and come up with a confident path before then. But yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that.
Based on our lack of information, which will probably continue through this week also, I'm hopeful that we'll have a lot of tests this week. I'm somewhat doubtful because, you know, with the change in behavior that we haven't been getting tested and getting the workout, but hopefully there'll be more than the 19 we had last week. We should have yet more information and be able to make a change. I think to compare us to Gilpin or to Jeffco, I mean, we can be really selective in how we pick the stuff we want to tell us the story we want to be told, but none of them really, you know, Gilpin is a one industry community that's had a whole different set of circumstances without the highway running through it. So they have a crowd that targets them and goes to them for the service that they render. And my understanding is that most of their workforce is imported, and their residents, especially during this last period, have tended to stay away from the places where they would get sick. I don't know about their relationship to curative. I know that Jefferson County had the same relationship, and so that their numbers are somewhat suspect. And I shared a spreadsheet I did the other day where I looked at the 5 counties that border on us, and the average infection rate of those 5 counties, if you include Park County, was about 498 or something like that per 100,000. And if you remove Park County, since the only road which connects us is closed for the winter, and we'd have no real interface with Park County, really against us, it was 500 and some infection rate. I don't think that we average that infection rate. I'd be shocked to find out that Clear Creek had that kind of number. And I had thought last week that we'd made the decision that we would wait until we saw the results from this week so that we had testing to know something again. And I'm guessing that's what CDPHE was reacting to also, was just a virtual complete dearth, a complete lack of testing here. So I would expect, like Dr. Ryan said, that we would see some loosening by the time if we choose to do what we said last week, which was follow the data, at least at some level, rather than our intuition, then I mean, I expect that we would probably see a move on Thursday or Friday too, once we actually saw the data from tomorrow's testing. What that would move to, I'm not an epidemiologist, nor do I have any idea how many people are going to show up. I think looking at our positivity numbers is as meaningless right now as looking at our infection rates, because if we tested one person and got 0, that would mean that we had a 0% infection rate and a 0% positivity, but I don't think it would tell us anything. And we've only averaged about 6 tests a week for the last 3 weeks, which is pretty close to doing that. And so I get totally the reason. I also am painfully aware of and empathetic with, having lived through other kinds of downturns, economic downturns that were contrived externally, how difficult it is for the restaurant owners. And so if I were a betting man, I'd do the same thing that Tim said, which is expect to be open to a greater extent. And the last thing I'll offer is that I was in 2 different restaurants that I patronized this weekend because I wanted them to have the business. And I won't name any names. They were doing a good job. It was clear that there were more than, because they're rolling tables, people are getting ready to leave, other people are coming in. It was clear that there were more than 25% in the couple of places that I went. Now they're smaller places, so they're harder to regulate and keep close to them, but they were doing a good job and staying, relatively close. They were probably somewhere in the 30 to 50% range occupancy just by practice of trying to maintain 25%. I would assume I'm going to assume that I'm going to take a wild guess that we would probably move to at least a 50% capacity as of this coming weekend. But if we saw something, and I'd be shocked by it, but if we saw something radically different, we'd have to respond to it. So to tell people to prepare for something that we don't actually know, but we're guessing at, is just like my colleagues, I'm guessing right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I appreciate that, Randy. I'm going to push back a little bit. We do have data, and everything that I've heard all along was that the way that you know that your data is meaningful is your test positivity rate. If your test positivity rate is high, that means there are people out there who should be getting tested who aren't getting tested. And I think I heard Dr. Ryan say our number was 2.4%, which I think is 3 times lower than what the state requires for you to consider your data valid. And the other thing I wanted to point out, and I'm seeing a couple of messages on the Q&A too, because we didn't offer testing doesn't mean that people didn't get tested. My physician will test me at the drop of a hat, essentially. All I have to do is call and go show up and pull my car up outside. So I think our data isn't perfect. I agree it would be great if we had better data, but we have data, and the data is telling a consistent story. That's the reason why the counties similar to us, Gilpin County, Jeffco, basically all the metro area who historically have had much worse community spread than we've had, went to yellow on Saturday. So
Understood. And I just think that all I'm saying is that our data is anecdotal, and yes, we have data. And if we had had one test, we could call that data, but we don't. And again, the positivity rate as well as the infection rate are equal to the sampling size that we have, that I would argue even under the best of times for Clear Creek County has been rather anecdotal. And I agree we've done a good job, and I'd like to see the businesses open too. And we set a path to look at data, and we'll have some more data after tomorrow. And we had no tests for 2 weeks. And I do believe that the tests that were, when people got tested elsewhere, I presume they go into a database and that does show up. Is that correct, Tim? So we have the data for the people that have tested elsewhere. Is that correct?
We do. My understanding, it would mainly contribute to the positives, not the negatives. So if I go down to Denver and get tested and I'm negative, that's not necessarily reflected in Clear Creek County. It's a positive case. And if you put as your place of residence, Clear Creek County, that would certainly count as a positive case.
Well, fair enough to Sean's point then. Yeah.
Yeah. And as I said before, no county is a good comparison. Gilpin or Jefferson or the mountains, none of those are really a perfect comparison to Clear Creek County. What I want to do, and again, CDPHE is the one who designates our color. What I would like to see is the true nature of our numbers, so that we as a county go to that level, right? Do we want to, I mean, what does everyone want to go to? Yellow, orange, blue, green, where do we want to go? Right? What we decide we want to do and what our numbers truly show us are 2 very different things, right? I don't want to go to a color. Then only a week later, once we do have more robust data, we go back in the opposite direction. And I hear from everyone, this seesaw yo-yo is a pain in the butt and it's very difficult to have a business. Yeah, I get it. So I would rather have us get to a true number that is more descriptive of where we truly are, and then we will likely stay there longer. Does that make sense? So from a restaurant's perspective, I get the yo-yo and how difficult it is to be on a yo-yo when you're a restaurant. So I'd rather take you off that yo-yo and be on a something that is going to be far more stable long-term, more than a week's time is really my, again, PhD is the one, what color, I found it this year, the governor for that matter, is behavior on any, to take what we have and look at that. And then, so Thursday we could go to,
I'm only catching about every other word.
Sorry, Tim, your connection's really bad right now.
I turned off his video to try and enhance the audio, but it's still not doing well.
yeah.
Sorry, Tim.
What's the difference between restaurant-wise between yellow and blue on the dial? I should know the answer to that, but things keep changing so frequently.
25% occupancy. So you're at 25 in orange and 50.
Can you hear me?
No, yellow and blue
Yeah,
is what I'm asking.
Yeah, the difference between yellow and blue is what Sean is.
My
I think they're
apologies.
both 50%, aren't they?
They're both 50%, but a higher capacity.
So it helps the larger place.
Right. So instead of up to 100 people, 50% up to 100, I think it goes up to 50% up to 175. So I
So it
think
would help the large restaurants quite a bit.
correct. Yes.
Right.
One other question I had, I mean, I definitely appreciate making data-driven decisions. What other data, even if maybe we would agree it's anecdotal, do we have regarding community spread? And I don't know, Brian, if you might be able to comment on the calls that your team has been responding to, or Crystal or anyone else. Just, I mean, obviously deaths and hospitalizations are time lag, but fairly correlated to the degree of community spread. Does anybody have anything else to offer besides what we've already talked about? 61 per 100K and 2.4% that we realize is imperfect data.
We've basically kind of plateaued. We're getting just about the same amount every week that we've gotten probably for the last 6 weeks or so. Just on a little side note, our feeling here is that, and I think you guys know this, what we saw this weekend, and with the storm cycles the way they are, that this is going to be the busiest that Clear Creek has been probably since this has all started. So all I can tell you is we're ramped up for a lot of people in this county over this next 3-day weekend. And I think everything's pointing to just a real busy, hectic weekend coming up. So I don't know if that's good, insightful information or not, but we're ramping up for that. And I think I've talked with Pip up at Loveland. I think they're going to have their busiest weekend also. So just to let you know.
But that's not, if I understand it, that's not necessarily related to your expectations with COVID. That's just because there's going to be a lot of people in the backcountry and up at Loveland and Echo, et cetera.
That's correct. Yeah, I'll let public health talk about COVID. We're just expecting to be really busy and plateaued our numbers with COVID people over like about the last 6 weeks. We've had 2 or 3 a week.
I see that Crystal unmuted, and I'm a little hesitant to carry this conversation too far without Tim in the room. But Crystal, go ahead.
We've seen a little bit of some backlash from the lodge closing down and those people getting farmed out throughout the community. And for whatever reason, we have had some, I don't know, not really outbreaks, but throughout some of the hotels where people have been going, I think that we're seeing an average of about 5 to 6 people that are close contacts with some of those people. And I think it's because of the living conditions. When you're in a hotel and you're in rooms, you tend to hang out in those small rooms together and that kind of stuff. And those people being displaced, I think, may have caused them to have some stress and stuff. So we've seen some spread in, I don't know if you want to consider it our homeless shelters, but the various hotels throughout the whole county, Georgetown to Idaho Springs, where these people have been located and where people are living in those hotels. We've seen some problems around those places.
Okay, thank you for that, Crystal, and welcome back, Tim. We caught about every other word the last couple minutes. If you feel like you want to.
It said my internet is unstable, and I think that would go well beyond my internet. Sorry, I missed out on that. I guess I would ask this group, what is it you want in terms of an outcome from this? Right now, we're at orange. CDPHE is waiting for our second week of data, which will be imminent Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, at which point we may move to yellow or even below that. I don't know. It's going to depend on what the data says. Right now, we're in blue based on last week's data. And so from a business perspective, do I think that we're going to move down a level, yellow or below? Highly likely, given what we see now. So that's all I can really give you is in terms of insight, and see what the data says after that. So what do we want? What's a takeaway from this meeting in this group is really what I'm interested in. If anything.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. I am too. And I just, before we jump into that, want to talk about some pieces of information that I gathered over the weekend. I looked at CDC. They actually will tell you what your testing volume has been and what it's been historically. I see that we tested 98 people in the last 7 days. And that is a big reduction. I'm actually gonna, well, I hesitate to share my screen because this graph is so small, but well, you know what? I can zoom in. I'm just gonna share my screen here. So this is our testing volume historically going back to mid-April, or maybe that's May. And you can see we did take a big jump down, but last week we're right here. And if you carry that line across, you can see that we're, that's about in the middle of the run, and except for these couple of months where we had a bunch of testing here between November, December. So, you know, what I'm suggesting is that maybe our testing is more adequate than we think based on the tests that we're getting outside of here. I also want to point out that I think when you're symptomatic, you're more likely to seek a test that day. And we only test 1 day a week. And I know for myself, or when you've had a close contact, I've had 3 COVID tests. One was early in the pandemic I was volunteering at a COVID test site. I know, Randy, Sean, you got that test too. The other 2 tests I had were because somebody who I had contact with told me they were positive or thought they might be positive. And so I went to get a test right away. Both of those times it happened outside this community. And what I'm getting at is I think the tests that we perform in this community are less likely to find positives than the tests that happen outside this community. And Tim, I see you nodding slightly. I wonder if you think that that's a reasonable assumption to make.
I think historically what we've seen is the majority of our cases that we see in any given week or 2-week period actually occurred in at our test sites as opposed to outside of the county.
Okay, so that might not be a good assumption to be making.
No, I mean, 10 to 12 of potentially 17, just taking the last 2 months as an example, were identified at our test site in Idaho Springs.
Okay, thanks. And so then I looked at the per 100,000 and per 10,000 testing rates of some of the communities around us. We've been at, on a per 10,000 basis, at 104. during this period of time, which is pretty low. Gilpin County is the only one that's in that neighborhood of our sort of epidemiologically related communities. There's some small counties around the state that have far lower testing than us, but I don't really think they're relevant. The reason I wanted to bring that up is that, what is 100 tests per 10,000 compared to what CDPHE thinks is the right number? And in the public health order, when they talk about the metrics to get to protect our neighbors, the minimum threshold for the number of testing to get in to protect our neighbors, to validate the data and get in to protect our neighbors, is 0.75 per 10,000. We're far above that. And I also, in seeing Gilpin County's comparatively low test rate and seeing that CDPHE chose to move them, it seems clear to me, and I'm not trying to make any accusations here, but it seems clear to me that it seems very likely that that has something to do with the opinions that are stated by the local public health authority. And so, Tim, I don't know if you had conversations with CDPHE or if they moved this without consulting you, and I'd love to know.
I have had a conversation with CDPHE regarding this, yes. In my opinion that I shared with them, which is typically, to be quite honest with you, ignored relatively frequently. But my opinion was the same opinion that I've been sharing with you guys for the last 3 weeks of, I would like to see 2 weeks worth of data before we move, for the reasons I've also stated here this morning of consistency and providing consistency rather than moving a level only to find out a week later that we have to move back a level because we haven't had the data to indicate whether we should be in blue, green, yellow, or orange or red. That was the opinion I shared with CDPHE when asked. The same opinion as I've shared with you guys. So nothing should be new or surprising. I don't know how much my opinion weighed on their decision in terms of where they want to move us. Just Gilpin as an example. I don't think Gilpin is a good comparison to Clear Creek County, given what goes on in Gilpin County, and the fact that the majority of people who work in Gilpin County don't actually live there. So cases of employees, just as an example, wouldn't be attributed to Gilpin County. They'd be attributed to whatever county the folks who work there live in. So I think it's artificially, and historically this has been the case, it's nothing new, but for Gilpin County, it's artificially low because the majority of the people who work in the only industry really in Gilpin County, which is the casinos, don't actually live there. They live in other counties. So I don't know that Gilpin County is a great comparison to us, just as other mountain counties aren't a good comparison either for a whole sorts of reasons. But
I think that, go ahead, George, sorry.
No, that's okay. I've got like a couple more things that I want to point out, but I'm happy to, I don't need to have this be a monologue.
No, go ahead and finish, please. I'm good.
Okay. So then I looked at our average positivity rating, and the number of tests that we would need to find 28 cases. 28 cases is important because if we find 28 cases in the last 7 days, between now and Thursday or Friday, that's when we would jump into orange and not be in yellow. If our average positivity stays the same, I think that's 1,100 tests we'd have to perform. If our average positivity doubles into 5, that's 562 tests that we'd have to perform. I don't think that we're going to get anywhere near that number of tests. And so we would have to see a major spike in average positivity, frankly, historic spike in average positivity for us to be in, say, in orange when we have this test data. And the reason that I want to point that out is because, it just, Tim, I'm kind of reinforcing your message that it seems very, very likely that there's not the amount of case spread in our community to stay in orange. So I think I'll just pause there to let you guys respond to how you feel about that. And then I think it's important, Tim, I agree with you. We need to move forward to what are we trying to get out of this conversation other than trying to give people the clearest read of the tea leaves possible.
Yeah, and I would also add, just as a chronological perspective, that the decision by CDPHE to put us or keep us in orange and not move us to yellow was made prior to last week's testing knowledge. Does that make sense? So I don't know that the 19 tests ever entered into the equation for CDPHE's decision in this. So it would have been literally 2 weeks prior or 2.5 weeks prior testing data that they're looking at without any further testing. So,
which was pretty much non-existent, and the testing during that time. And I think, I mean, the math that George just talked about is easy to understand, and I get it. It's just that it's still based on factors that are not driven by I'll say a wholesome database and size. I mean, it's just our numbers, even at 19 tests that we did locally last week. Then I tend to agree with Tim. I'm not trying to hold this up forever. I want to see businesses open, but I think we set upon a pretty intelligent path last week, which was to wait until we had the data and have the patience to wait a few days to get that. And those few days are going to be about 3 days from now to have data and be able to confidently know that we're actually stating something based on not our not inconsequential ability to crunch the numbers and make conclusions from them, but to have numbers that are meaningful from which we can actually draw, responsible conclusions that aren't, for the most part, guesswork. And even then, it'll be guesswork. It's always going to be guesswork till this is over. But
one question I would throw out there to the business community is, are you ready for blue? I understand financially, everyone's ready for blue. Everyone's ready for protect our neighbor. But I would ask from a guidance and from a safety perspective, are you ready for blue? Because it could be on Saturday we go to blue. So I would move, if I was a business owner, I would be moving towards that, the readiness to be at a much less restrictive path than we are right now. And so it's, that's my guidance at this point. Are we going to stay in orange? Highly unlikely. Are we going to be moving to yellow? Probable, quite probable. Are we moving below that? I don't know. We'll see. But I would ask the businesses to be ready to do that so that we're not caught off guard. I'm not talking about ordering lettuce and tomatoes. I'm talking about, are you ready from a increased capacity perspective in your establishment? And I would echo, and I have many times, Sean's point early on of, I think the business community in Clear Creek County is doing a fantastic job. Are there exceptions to that? Absolutely. Am I going to call them out right now and COVID shame, as you might call it? I'm not, but you know who you are. There are businesses who are not in compliance and refuse to be in compliance for the most part, but the vast majority of businesses in Clear Creek County are doing an absolutely fantastic job. And it's why, to Sean's point, our numbers are staying low and have historically been lower than many of our neighbors. I would ask that we continue to do that. Now is not the time to let down our guard. And I heard an analogy this morning that I shared with my team in the meeting this morning earlier before this, was right now, we're in essence in the eye of the hurricane. Our numbers across the nation, across the state are declining. Case counts, hospitalizations, deaths, unfortunately, have not followed suit yet, but all those numbers are declining. The variants are the ones that are potentially going to cause us on the other side of the eye. As you know, hurricanes are circular. Coming out the other end, is it a poop storm on the other side, for lack of a better term, or is it going to remain calm? And that's really the biggest unknown at this point. The vaccines are helping and rolling out, as you have all heard. but the variants are going to potentially cause a major challenge. The primary reason behind that is, yes, the vaccine will protect you for the most part from all those variants. What will not protect you is prior COVID diagnosis. What we know is that you can be reinfected with the variant from the UK or the variant from Brazil or the variant from South Africa, regardless of whether you've had COVID or not. It does not offer you the same protection as does the vaccine. So all those 25 plus million, or even more than that, the current estimates are 75 to 100 million Americans have had COVID. All those folks are potentially, and the key word there is potentially, still at risk of getting one of these variants. So that's the thing most epidemiologists and people at the top are looking at is those variants and what the other side of the eye of the storm looks like. The more we can contain those variants, meaning socially distance and wear your mask and do everything we've been doing, will help keep those variants down and the prevalence of those variants down. That's the biggest risk to our economy in Clear Creek, but also the state and the bigger picture of the government, or the national picture.
I'd like to tag off something Tim just said, and only because of the timeliness, if I could, which is when I gave my observation of a couple of places that I saw this last weekend. I wasn't knocking those places. What I saw was small places trying to survive, not trying to cheat at all, but seeing people coming in the door and not wanting to turn them away when they know that table over there is getting ready to leave in a little bit. And so it's really hard for them to ride that wave that's right along 25%, and they're doing the best they could, and I saw, and I watched them, counting people and doing the math in their head and trying to figure it out. So I'm not knocking the way anyone is particularly acting here right now. I think everyone's trying to stay right there. It was just an observational thing. And the other thing is, we think about this and move forward into that conversation of what do we want to come out of this meeting. First of all, it's clear that CDPHE makes the distinction, and that one of the things that they use when they make that distinction, when they decide what will be for any given week, is it appears to be based upon what they hear out of that county as well as what they observe mathematically out of that county. I would not at all want to influence Tim to say anything different than his epidemiological PhD determination. In other words, we should not be instructing Tim to say something that he does not agree with to CDPHE. So then it means that what that has to do is it has to come from us. Now, someone else here may hold a different opinion, than it is Tim's job to say apples when he believes oranges. I'm just tell you right now that I'm completely averse to asking a public health professional that we've hired to help keep our lives safe to say something other than what he believes. So, and I don't know anyone here is suggesting that, but when we suggest that what we say to the state can impact the outcome of what the state decides for us, that's just a nuance that I think we need. That's a bridge I wanted to cross as early in the conversation as possible.
I think that's a good point, Randy, and I'd like to comment on that. My experience of PhDs is they are very smart people who are very smart and in a very narrow discipline. And I think Tim fits into that category too. I think the conversation we're having here is a pretty broad conversation, and epidemiology is part of it, but it's not the full conversation. And that's why I don't believe we should be allowing the so-called experts to make public policy decisions. And that's why we got elected and Tim didn't. So that's the only kind of
right. No, and all
I would add to that.
And I completely agree with you. I would say, from talking to Tim and having conversations, that I find him to be a little more than narrowly informed or intelligent on this subject. And I think he's been very sensitive to the economy along the way. And we've all got perspectives. All I'm saying is it's you and me and George that change that message. I'm saying that it's not Tim that says something, because Tim may be smarter than any of the three of us about the balance between economy and health. He's certainly the only one that's educated on one of the two sides of that equation. And so I'm just saying that I hold him in very high regard, and I've been quite impressed by everything he said. And so it would be far from our level of knowledge to be able to presume to influence the words that come out of his mouth to CDPHE. That's all I'm saying.
I'll take all of those as compliments in some way, shape, or form. But just to be clear, CDPHE is the one who makes the policy decisions for our county from the dial's perspective, right? And when they ask my opinion, I am balancing both the health perspective and the economic perspective, which is what I've said from the very first day I started, that I'm going to try to balance those two things as best as humanly possible. And so CDPHE, when asked my opinion, they're asking my professional health opinion, which I'm happy to give them, as I do all of you. And they're the ones who weigh all of the different variables and determine where on the dial they're going to put us. Can I influence that? I'm not really sure of my influence on CDPHE, to be frank with you. I have offered and made many suggestions to them, most of which have gone by the wayside. So I am happy to reach out to them on Thursday to try to get or Wednesday to try to get a better sense of where we might be headed, to give businesses an extra day or two. But again, if I was a business, I would be anticipating moving down on Friday or Saturday, and take that for what it's worth. That's my professional opinion based on what I know and understand of the irrational logic behind many decisions that are made at the top. And so that's all I can really do. Yeah, an economist I am not, but I think I understand the economy enough to know how things work and what impact policy decisions from a health perspective have on the economy for certain.
I wanted to just, I'm a little surprised that we didn't hear from anyone on the business community, because what I think is going on, what I think I heard the frustration over the weekend was a little bit with this weekend, right? I heard from a couple of restaurant owners, hey, you guys kicked us in the shins pretty hard. I could have had X number more clients served this weekend, but that's water under the bridge. I think what people are concerned about is that CDPHE, because they're focused on the whole state and have a lot of things going on, may not be paying attention to us, and that we may miss out on the President's Weekend too, even though we have good numbers. So I'm not jumping up and down thinking we should change things today, because I don't think it makes much of a difference to the business community whether it's today. I think what they want is certainty about next weekend, if in fact we have the data to support that. But I don't want to speak for the business community. I would rather hear from them, because I think we can talk about this probably all morning long, and I think we all have some good informed opinions. But I think, to George's point, what do we need to figure out right now? What's left for the next 15 minutes or however long we talk about this?
Yeah, and I think, Sean, I had a number of communications over the weekend too. I know there's a lot of frustration out there. I agree that it's not worth it to litigate the decision of last week, which I think is defensible. I think it's about how we are moving forward. And so to that end, I think what I'd like to ask is that we reach out to CDPHE as soon as possible to tell them that we're looking to be responsive as new data comes in, and that we want every opportunity for the lack of bad news. The lack of really bad news, because it would be, a super high average positivity rate that would keep us in orange. We want to make sure that if that absence of bad news is indeed there, that we're able to move. That means that CDPHE needs to be paying attention to us and know. So I'd like to make that request. And Tim, I hope you feel like that's appropriate.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I would not have disagreed with that approach last week had it been articulated that way either. And I think that functionally that's what we did articulate, was let's see some data before we move. And so that's, if the request is, we would like CDPHE to respond to the new data that we get and be able to treat us equitably for our economy. That, had that been articulated that way last week, I'd have agreed with that. The way we did articulate it, which actually has virtually the same outcome, is the one I support. So I support them both because they're pretty much one and the same.
Yeah, to me, and I don't disagree with that. To me, the big difference was all the other counties who appear to be less responsible than us went to yellow and we didn't. And that's what I think has me concerned, that we're a small county. It would be easy to be forgotten, and that would be tragic.
Yeah, that the inconsistency has been maddening since the beginning. Whether it was times that we wanted to be more protected and we weren't, or now the other way around, it's been pretty maddening to see that indecipherable inconsistency, and Tim has noted that from his professional perspective as well.
Yeah, and just to be clear, and given my limited abilities, I have from day one, CDPG is not going to forget Clear Creek County and hasn't forgotten us. I pound that damn drum every single time I have an opportunity for them to listen to CDP or to listen to Clear Creek County. And sometimes I'm successful, but oftentimes I am unsuccessful because they have, to Sean's point, much bigger fish to fry at this point in time. They have a ton on their plate, and I do sympathize with them, as frustrating as they are. They have an immense amount of things on their plate. I don't think CDPHE forgot about Clear Creek County or overlooked Clear Creek County. I think they have, and to Randy's point, been historically inconsistent for a whole host of reasons, and I'm not going to elaborate or defend any of them, but it is our reality. And so I try to use my pulpit, as limited as it is, to continue to pound that drum with CDPHE so that we are heard and we are not forgotten. And our perspective is considered when they're making decisions, both about the state more broadly, but also about our specific county. And so.
So I think, George, one question I would have for you and for Sean would be, since Tim is very much in keeping, which I think was just the last part of the sentence that was maybe never said last week, was that we certainly wish for the state to, as quickly as possible, respond to the good news, if assuming that our news is good news, that it's not bad news. And by that I mean, like you said very well, very bad news, the kind of stuff that would have kept any county from moving into that. Would this then, coming out of today, would be more of a, effectively, we're not taking any votes today, but generally a staff direction that we would hope that message be carried forward, because it sounds like Tim was very much in agreement that was the intent, was wait for the right data and then ask the state to respond quickly to the data so that our businesses can have the best advantage possible. Is that kind of what you're thinking, is like a general understanding with Tim that would be the message we would hope that would go, as long as it was consistent with his own beliefs?
Yeah, and I would appreciate if we just dropped a message that, we're looking at our data, we're looking to make decisions quick. And I don't know if that means, Tim, one of the questions I have left in my head is, do we think by Thursday we'll have enough data if we test on Tuesday? If you don't get any results on Thursday?
I do, George, sorry to cut you out. I do. So Mako is very timely in terms of the turnaround time. They're averaging 1.3 days in turnaround time. So the tests that are done on Tuesday go to the lab on Tuesday. And so I would imagine by the end of day Thursday, we should have the vast majority of tests that are done tomorrow. We should have those results back. The challenge for us is if there is a delay for positive cases, for them to enter them into CEDARS. It's only once they're in CEDARS that we learn of the positive nature of them, right? So if there's a delay in that, it would delay our knowledge. But I imagine by Thursday at the end of the day, we should have a very good sense of what our numbers are going to look like coming out of this week.
So it seems like, where we're at is, what's come out of this conversation is that, everything around us indicates that we are most likely to be in a position where we would move to a less restrictive mode, probably yellow, at least, because they don't like to move you 2 spots on the dial immediately anyway, by the end of this week. But we'd have to be honest and say that there are no guarantees in life. And, it's possible we could be wrong, but that even Tim's expectation is that we would be unlikely to be so wrong as to not be able to make that move. Is that correct? Is
I
that
would agree with that. Yeah.
So there's another piece here, which is kind of two questions trying to get at the picture of sufficiency of data. How many tests do we think we need to have taken on Tuesday to feel like we have data? And then what's our response if we feel like late this week or by Tuesday that we don't have enough tests to have 100% clear picture? And I'll state my opinion, and I think that this is, when it comes to balancing economy versus health and all of that, I think I do have a voice here. And my opinion is that I would like to see us be ready to move forward, even if we only get 19 people that show up to take tests on Tuesday. We would have another week of data where yes, we don't have the testing rate that we are accustomed to and like, but if there's no bad news, even in a sample like 19 tests taken locally or 100 taken everywhere, I still think my preference is for us to ask to move to orange, and have to declare the end of the period where we need tests to know for sure.
Yeah, George, one, we would be asked to move to yellow, not orange.
My apologies. Thank you.
But I think it's less, to answer your question, it's less about the total number who get tested tomorrow. And it's more the fact that we've offered community testing now 2 weeks in a row where people have had the opportunity. And I don't know who it was that made this point earlier, but it's about test seeking behavior. And we have now provided 2 weeks running the opportunity for those folks who feel symptomatic or who have, like you heard, oh, my so-and-so tested positive, I should go get tested, right? So it's less about the total number, whether it's 10 tomorrow or 25 or 105, and more about the fact that we've offered concurrently 2 weeks in a row the ability to community test. And so whether it's 19 tomorrow or not, we've achieved that 2 weeks running of offering community testing. To me, as what I represent, that is one of the two major pieces. The other is numbers, but the fact that we've now offered it 2 weeks running, whether we get 19 tomorrow or 105 is less relevant than the fact that we've offered testing 2 weeks running. And so I think on Thursday, I feel comfortable, and I'm not feeling any I really, and I mean this no offense, I try to ignore lots of outside influence on how I think from a scientific perspective. And so I'm not feeling influenced by any of you, no offense, but in terms of my message to CDPHE. Having said that, I am comfortable on Thursday to call and as best as I can get a hold of somebody, particularly Mara, get a hold of her and say, I'm feeling comfortable with where we're at and moving us down on the dial. Right now, I feel comfortable with that, and we'll feel more comfortable with that after tomorrow.
I had the same reaction to the number of tests, which was we have no guarantee also how many tests we're going to get. I think hopefully for those who are listening in today, spread the word. The more people that get tested, the better. And right now, because it will help infill, and the reason that we did this wait was because we had 2 to 3 weeks of virtually no testing after learning that the testing we had was a lot less helpful than it should have been all along, as it turns out. And my feeling on behalf of the business community is that if we don't have people, if we've gone through a couple of 3 weeks of minimal testing and we're not getting the results then in the aggregate, and if we're asking people to come test and they're not coming to get tested, all of that kind of ties together to, okay, it's time to move. I mean, if we don't get that 100 tests, if we don't get that, if all we got was another 19 tests or 11 tests or whatever it was tomorrow, A, the people aren't coming out of the woods with symptoms. And B, we gave it about as long as we could, and we turned over at least the number of stones that we could find to turn over, and we didn't find anything under them. And we have an obligation to act at that point.
What do you think about inviting Mara to our COVID update tomorrow at 11? And having a very short version of this conversation in public with her?
Sure. My guess is that her schedule doesn't have any flexibility in it, given day to day in the meetings. But I'm more than happy to reach out to her and invite her to that conversation.
Or someone from her team, yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure we've had conversations in public with her before.
Yeah,
it
we
be-
have with the week's notice, but yeah.
Yeah, would it be even more I know she due to a request I'd made for information one time, she called even me in the evening. She can be pretty responsive. Would it be even more helpful if we were to do that, if we called another special meeting and did that on Thursday once we had the data, or we wouldn't maybe have the data back in time on Thursday, depending on what time we called the meeting? And I didn't even look at my schedule when I said that. So.
Randy, I kind of like that suggestion. I mean, regardless of CDPHE's involvement, I think a Thursday afternoon, late afternoon meeting would be great.
agree.
And my calendar, I can miss what's on my calendar to be available for that at 4 or 4:30.
I open up at 2:30 from then on Thursday. And actually that 2:30 even, depending, although the later the better, because the more likely we are to have the results. Is that correct, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do have a public town hall Thursday evening from 6 to 7, but
So maybe 4:00 or something like that. Whatever Mara could come to, or her assigned representative.
I mean, even 4:30. I mean, I don't know that we need to sit around and talk about it for an hour, given the depth of the of the data that we've gotten into today. But to have an update and get some clarity in a public setting, I think would be great.
I was just thinking about Tim and his town hall meeting. I know he likes to center himself starting at least an hour ahead of time. So.
Oh yeah. If Tim, I mean, whatever your preference is.
no, and it very well may be a short conversation. Very well may be at that point, the decision has already been made to move us to level yellow or whatever the decision is. So I imagine at that point, most people will be satisfied with the outcome and isn't going to require a very lengthy conversation, more than an hour, but who knows?
Okay, so and Sean, I don't want to give you an opportunity to announce any schedule conflicts around that period.
I can make it work for sure. I'm sorry, someone was going to call me at 10, so I got to drop off for just a second. Maybe we're done here. I'm not sure, but I'll make it work, whatever you guys have.
Yeah, I note that we had that standard blurb in there for an executive session, I think, but we can do that tomorrow if no one else has a burning need to discuss today.
That's a good question. I don't know. Keith, Peter, I know we had some stuff that was scheduled for tomorrow. Could make sense to try to knock it out today.
I was suggesting the opposite, but if we don't have anything for today, Sean he had his phone call and stuff, and
I'd prefer tomorrow.
Yeah.
I've got other things on my calendar here.
Okay.
I prefer tomorrow.
Okay, so then just to summarize, we're waiting to see what happens with tests. We think that we'll have enough information by Friday afternoon to make a decision. We think it's highly likely we won't find the number of positives to keep us there, but that's, if we do, then them's are the breaks. And we'll be meeting did we set a time for that at 4 or 4:30? Tim, name your price.
Let's do 4:30. I do have a meeting at 4 around next round funding, which I don't want to miss, for CDPHE funding to help our county. So that's something I would not want to miss. So 4:30 on Thursday.
Okay, and to make sure I understood you, George, I thought I heard you say that we would have enough information by tomorrow to be. Did you say Thursday or tomorrow? Thursday.
I meant by Thursday.
Okay, okay.
I often misspeak, so who knows what I said, but
Well, I
that's
know I often mishear. I wasn't even sure what I heard. So,
One thing, I've been watching the Q&A and it looks like, I know we did a public comment at the beginning of this conversation. We've had a pretty substantial conversation. I think if our schedule's allowed, and my 10 o'clock thing is done now, it might make sense to take a couple brief comments from the public if that's appropriate.
I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a hard stop at 10 o'clock.
Okay. Yeah, I don't need it either anymore.
Okay, well, I'm going to open up another period of public comment. I see some of you have already put your thoughts into the chat, but feel free to click participants, raise your hand. I see we do have one person here.
Just
Craig.
Craig, yeah.
Okay. Craig Abrahamson, please state your name, where you live, make a comment.
Craig Abrahamson, 815 Main Street, Georgetown. I just want to say on behalf of the business community, we appreciate the conversation. We appreciate the timeliness of the conversation. We appreciate a clarification in terms of the objectivity and the basis of decision-making and kind of the process there. And I think that's some of that was what was missing perhaps for a lot of us, is just understanding kind of the basis for the state's move, for our opinions about the state's move. And I think for the most part, speaking on behalf of people without their permission, we're satisfied with the direction that you guys have laid out today. None of this is ever intended to be adversarial, at least on our part, although sometimes I'm sure it feels that way. The efforts of public health to keep Clear Creek County safe have been remarkable. I continue to heard just again yesterday from people who are so impressed by our vaccination efforts. They have the kind words don't stop flowing. And we know that doesn't come without a lot of effort. So thanks for that. Thanks for the conversation. We'll all look to participate in Thursday's conversation and hear what the state has to say then. So thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I see Mayor Hillman, you popped on your camera. I don't know if you had something to say.
No, nothing. I would just tag on to what Craig said. Thanks to all the commissioners to understanding how important this is to our business community, and hope for the best by this weekend. And again, always thank you, Dr. Ryan, for your input and keeping up with the ever so changing rules, regulations, criteria. And yeah, it's been a tough go for the last year, but I just want to say thanks to all of you.
I did notice one particular, there were a lot of different points in chat that I think were covered. One thing that Craig had put into chat was that, hopefully don't do this on Saturday, do it on Friday. Well, that would be our hope as well. If we have determined the point that there's going to be a change, we want it to be the maximum benefit. Recognize that with ordering schedules, even finding out on Thursday afternoon or Friday can be tough to come up with enough perishable goods into your store, to be able to, into your shop, to be able to turn out the meals that you need to, and because you hate to order too many perishable goods and stuff like that. But we would hope to get it as quickly as I would hope to get it as quickly as possible. And I'm positive I speak for the other two commissioners upon receiving that data on Thursday. Once we know the good news or the bad news, let's get a decision made and get people to work.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I saw that comment come by and meant to address it. Thank you for addressing it. I agree. If we think we're good by Thursday at 4:30, there's no reason not to have it be effective by Friday. So all that said, thank you for providing that comment. Any other final words from anybody on the screen, or shall we call it a productive and informative meeting?
The latter.
The latter it is. We are adjourned. Our next public meeting, of course, is this Tuesday at 9 a.m. and we'll open up with public comment like we always do.
And I just want to say real quick, thanks, Beth, for watching our requests over the weekend and noticing this legally and appropriately. Good job.
As usual.
Yep. All right, everybody, have a great day. Thank you very much.